You're going to listen to a check-in interview with the world's leading researcher and practitioner when it comes to nutrient density and food. The co-founder of the largest certification body in the world focused on quality of food, objective, measurable, outcome-based, which is doing over 3 billion a year, mostly animal protein. Is this egg good for you or could it cause inflammation? And recently they went to do veggies, so very interesting to learn more about that. There's no better person to talk to in this series on nutrient density, on the latest science, consumer interest, and how to build a movement around this crucial topic. Enjoy! What are the connections between healthy farming practices, healthy soil, healthy produce, healthy gut, and healthy people? Welcome to a special series where we go deep into the relationship between regenerative agriculture practices that build soil health and the nutritional quality of the food we end up eating. We unpack the current state of science, the role of investments, businesses, nonprofits, entrepreneurs, and more. This series is supported by the A-Team Foundation, who support food and land projects that are ecologically, economically, and socially conscious. They contribute to a wider movement that envisions a future where real food is produced by enlightened agriculture and access to it is equal. The A-Team Foundation are looking to make more investments and grants in the space of bionutrients. You can find more here, ateamfoundation.org, or get in touch directly, info@ateamfoundation.org, or check the information in the show notes below. Welcome to another episode. Today we welcome back on the show Pierre Weill, the president of the Bleu-Blanc-Coeur Association, who we had back here in October 2020, and let's say on the nutrient in general, but in the world, there was still fooling COVID, but also in the nutrient side of things, the nutrient density, a lot has happened. So I'm extremely happy to have him back to check in. Of course, I will link below the interview we did before and a great interview he did with Dan Kittredge. Just to, if you want to have more background, more general background, but I'm very happy to have you back here and to check in what has happened in the world of nutrient density in Bleu-Blanc-Coeur and in general. Welcome back, Pierre.
Thank you. Welcome. Happy to be here.
And I remember, for many non-French speakers, Bleu-Blanc-Coeur, or not living in a French-speaking country, let's say, you're not very famous, unfortunately. But you're one of the biggest certification bodies, I think, in the world that specifically looks at quality and how, in many cases, animal protein has been raised. And specifically, that was triggered, and I won't repeat the whole interview we did before, with a lot of soy import in France that started 20, 30 years ago. And now you have made a big step. So I think we start unpacking immediately and dive into the veggie side of things. So no longer only animal protein, but you're looking at vegetables as well. How come? Why make your life more difficult?
Well, I think last time I probably said something like we did an easy proof of concept on the animal side of the food chain, because we did all these trials in these 20, 30 years, making the proof that the way you feed the animal has an impact of the health of human beings. So of course you think you can make the same things on the vegetal side. The way the carrots, the tomatoes, or the wheat is fed will have an impact on the nutrient density of the grain, of the fruits, of the leaves, etc., and will have an impact on the health of the human being in the same way. But it's so we do it. We do trials on it. We do research on it for a couple of years. It's quite difficult, but we start looking at things that will be, I think, really important in the future.
Because what makes it? It's almost interesting to see that the animal protein side is easier, or quote unquote easier. Of course, you spent a few decades on it, but then where sort of the soil is one step away because the animal is absorbing it and eating it. And in this case, when we go straight for the carrot or straight for the veggie, it's more tricky. Why is that? Is it we're not used yet, we have to spend a few decades on it, or is it like by definition more tricky?
No, by definition it's more tricky because a plant is fed by the sun first. After you took the energy from the sun, she put energy in the soil, and all the microbiology of the soil using this energy provides nutrients to the plant. And then the nutrient density of the plant is related to the chlorophyllic synthesis, the way the plant catch energy from the sun, gives to the soil, and then from the quality of the soil. And a lot of things happen in the soil. It's quite more complicated that to feed cows with, for instance, grass compared to corn. To compare the way a tomato is fed in this kind of soil compared to another kind of soil, it's more tricky. So we did a lot of trials to see what is the difference. First, what we have to check, what we have to measure, what is nutrient density of a vegetables, what is nutrient density of a fruit, of a grain, etc. And this was probably the first step. Like 20 or 25 years ago, we said, okay, let's go on the animal side. We'll go on the anti-inflammatory process, which is very related to the omega-6, omega-3 ratio in the fat, because animal fat are the main fat in a Western diet, because the composition of the animal fat in omega-6 and omega-3 is related to the quality of the feed. We started the process. So the first step on the vegetal side was say, okay, what is...
Find the equivalent. Yeah, what's the omega-3/6 ratio of a carrot?
Well, a carrot,
equivalent,
carrot, tomato, grain. It's let's say roughly it's the antioxidant value of the vegetables. In all the nutritional advice, I say we have to eat more legumes, for instance, more I say in English, more pulses, I think, because it's very rich in antioxidant. So the first part of the work, we did it with Dan Kittredge and the Bionutrient Association in the US in a lab, was to check what is the level of antioxidant and polyphenols in different pulses, in different vegetables. And we found we put the technology of a Dan here in France with a lab, and we analyzed the tomato, carrots, etc. And we found huge difference from 1 to 50, for instance, for the...
Wow.
Yeah, I said...
Because the lab wasn't functioning, or because there were these differences?
The lab was functioning.
1 to 50 is massive.
Yes, it's massive. So of course it depends of the genetic, it depends of the season, it depends of the soil, it depends of a lot of things. That's just when you say eat carrot, because it's very rich in beta carotene. That's true, but the quantity of beta carotene is from 1 to 20, and then in the US he has the same results. So this was the first step. Say, okay.
And did you find any connection to the soil? Like, is there or did you find any potential explanation of these differences?
So this is the second step, to find first to say, okay, we measured big variation, massive variation, and the second is to understand why. So to understand why, there is of course connection with the yield. If you have a very big yield, you will have lower nutrient density. It's connected with the genetic, with the variety, and it's connected with the soil, and especially with the organic matter of the soil. If you have, I don't know, you probably have heard of John Kempf, the US agronomist, and the John Kempf triangle. Say, okay, first you have sugars. Sugars is made by the sun. You don't need soil to produce sugar if you are a plant. After you have protein, with sugar, with energy, sugar from the sun, and with the genetic, you can synthesize the protein quite easily. Then comes the lipids and the small nutrients like antioxidant, vitamin, etc. And this is impossible to synthesize without the help of the microbiology of the soil. So of course there is big impact, and we checked, for instance, the difference between two tomatoes, the same variety, and the same day. They were implanted the same day, the same age. One was produced in the same place without soil, like most of the tomatoes today, in glass. glass house, you say?
In a greenhouse, yeah.
Greenhouse. Then the second was also in greenhouse, in the same place, same variety, etc., but in a living soil, with a soil with a lot of life. With they put wood, they put you call it lombric. Lombric is the little
snails,
yeah, etc., etc. And we had a difference in antioxidants with different tests, about 40 to 50% for some vitamins.
Sorry, 4050, right? Not 1415.
Yeah, 4050.
Wow.
For vitamin C. We had more, I think I don't remember. For the total antioxidant, it was from 30 to 40, depending on the test.
Wow.
And for the vitamin C, it was 50% more. But this is an easy test.
First results, of course. Easy test, but still, it shows, and I will link below, because we had John on the podcast before, but also John had a great talk at some point with Dan Kittredge as well, to explain that pyramid. Like, it's easy, the first few levels you can get without soil, but then when you get to the complexer things that we also need, but we barely understand, then you need living soil.
But after, if you compare two soils, not one tomato without soil and other, it's more difficult. But we had some interesting results with leaves, with salads, like that. If you compare, so we had more, I don't remember the data exactly, but significantly more antioxidant value if in the same soil, with the same variety, same season, etc. But if you compare organic fertilizer to synthetic fertilizer, nitrogen, so we understand, like in the John Kemp triangle, if you provide a lot of nitrogen at the same time, the plant will use it to make growth, to make leaves, etc. But if you provide nitrogen in an organic fertilizer with manure or thing like that, then she will use it slowly, and she will be able to synthesize more antioxidants, more small nutrients, and she will need a lot of cofactors that comes not only from nitrogen but also from the microbiology of the soil. So we discuss a lot with Dan and Dan Kittredge, and we have the same goal. The same goal is to not to say this is good, this is not good, but to say, okay, a tomato is supposed to have a lot of antioxidant, of lycopene. A carrot is supposed to have a lot of beta carotene. So our goal is to say, like we do in milk, for instance, we say a milk without omega-3, it's like an orange without vitamin C. It's milk, but it's milk from a cow that it was fed only with corn and soybean. And if the same cow eat grass, she will have omega-3 in the milk. So if a tomato is grown in a living soil, she will have a certain level of vitamin and of antioxidant. And this antioxidant ratio is very connected to the anti-inflammatory ratio for the animal side. So we continue. So now we want to develop more data more on the with the current analysis, which are quite expensive, and we want to use some new technologies or some old technology like spectrophotometry, but to be able to give a quick view, a quick analysis of the value. And like in the animal side, we say we think that once the farmer, the producer, know the goal, he said, okay, I want this level of vitamin C or this level of antioxidant, he will be able to produce it. He will use his own way of making the soil more with more life. I don't know how you say, but it's a good objective.
And does it mean, like with Bleu-Blanc-Coeur, because you've been certifying on omega-3 and 6 and certain specific ratios on animal protein, and a lot. Like, just to give a bit of background, this is you certify a few billion euros a year in terms of animal protein in France, Belgium, I think Italy partly as well. And so this is not a tiny label. You do a massive amount of pork meat, for instance, eggs in France, milk, and other things. Is it in the plans that vegetables will follow? Is that the goal to do a similar program?
Yeah, of course. We have already vegetables on the market with the Bleu-Blanc-Coeur brand. It's quite...
Which means you decided what's a good ratio. Like, this is good enough to be... Yeah,
it's...
to have the step.
So we go step by step. First our spinach. Spinach with a level of vitamin B.
Why spinach is first?
Sorry?
Because it's easy. Why spinach first?
Why spinach? I don't know. Why spinach? It's the kind of spinach that is eaten by Popeye with a lot of iron.
The iron, yeah.
No, it's not iron. It's vitamin B, I think. B9, something like that. So we have spinach. We have salad. We'll probably have tomato in very soon. And we say, okay, that's the level. And that's the obligation of results is a level of antioxidant. And the obligation of means, you can be organic or you can be other things, like in France we call it pour une agriculture du vivant. It's agriculture for living soil or high value for environment, etc. We don't push for obligation of means. We need a minimum, but we have an obligation of results. And so we have at the moment the first vegetables, and we think we'll have more in the future, but we have to go step by step and to implement first scientific studies and also our own development to have the tools for the measures, because it's different, it's difficult. So the first step was probably the more important, to say, okay, what is important? It's probably this oxidant, antioxidant value. After we'll have to make a clinical trials, because at the moment nobody did it. Only very, very few in the literature when comparing, for instance, organic tomatoes to conventional tomatoes. They can find differences in the composition with more antioxidant in the organic tomato. But when you give this tomato to volunteers, you don't find difference in the blood. So it's disappointing. So we'll have to organize it, to do it, and to prove. Okay, if you eat this tomato, in a perfect word, if you eat a Bleu-Blanc-Coeur meal with Bleu-Blanc-Coeur meat, Bleu-Blanc-Coeur cheese, and Bleu-Blanc-Coeur salad and tomato, it will be better for you. So we have to prove it. We can.
Yeah, because that's what you've shown. Yeah, that's what you've shown, like with this obligation of outcome, but also a lot of clinical trials in over the last decades. That the difference with consuming, at least on the animal protein side, are quite strong. Like, you could see it in your blood quite quickly. You could see it in if you're breastfeeding quite quickly. You can see the differences in terms of inflammatory disease, etc. And so now you're going out into the vegetable and non-animal protein world to do the same, because that hasn't been done. I think there's very few studies. I mean, we've interviewed Stefan van Vliet, who's doing a study in the US, but I think there are very few randomized control, because it's difficult, of course, it's very tricky, but it's so needed.
It's difficult, and to prove you have a difference. If you do it only with tomato, for instance, it's quite difficult. Yeah. And our goal is to do it with two different meals, with all the stuff provided by the Bleu-Blanc-Coeur agriculture or conventional agriculture. And then the vegetal side is very important too. But that's the difference between it's very difficult to make proof with on the animal side. All our clinical trials, except two, were done only with dairy products. Dairy products is very important because it's about 1/3 of the total fat that is eaten in at least in France. But of all the fat, including vegetal fat. But all the other clinical trials were done with eggs plus dairy plus cold cuts, etc. So post meat, so when you approach global meat with vegetal and animals, I think it will be easier to measure a difference.
So why is dairy such a fundamental focus, or has it been until now?
Well, dairy fat is about 1/3 of the total fat eaten by an average French consumer. That's first answer. And the second, the composition of dairy fat is very, very complex. You have something like 400 different fatty acids, and all of them change a lot. So the consequences, even of small fatty acid like conjugated fatty acid or omega-6 or omega-3 fatty acid from dairy fat, have a huge impact on human health. So dairy fat, we did 2 trials that were dedicated to impact of changes in dairy fat. But the main objective of our clinical trial was to have the impact of a complete meal. And it's more difficult to have the specific impact of egg or tomato or bread, etc. So our final goal is to have the impact of a global meal. Sorry.
And what do you think of? I have to ask, of all the dairy alternatives. Has that entered your research in somehow, or because of course over the last 20 years, like let's say a lot has changed in the alternative dairy space. What do you see and think there?
Well, that's a main concern for us, not only for dairy but for all the animal sectors, that there is a big environmental pressure to decrease the consumption of animal products. And it's true. It's true that to produce 1 calorie or 1 gram of protein of animal, it costs more in terms of environmental cost than 1 gram of vegetal protein. But we participate to study in 2014. It's a long time ago, to see what is the good balance between environment and nutrition. From a nutritional side, there is absolutely no possible comparison between soy milk, for instance, and cow's milk. I said in cow's milk you have 400 different fatty acids. In soy milk you have maybe 10 different fatty acids, and the variety is the basis for health. But you can
just like a small sentence you mentioned, like variety is the basis for health. I think that's probably should base all dietary advice on. But okay, sorry, continue. Sorry for the interruption.
Not only for men, same for the soil and for the animals. Variety is the basis for us. And so I think we need animal protein, not for protein, but for all the other nutrients which are related to animals, which means some long-chain fatty, omega-3 fatty acid, some vitamins, B12, D3, etc. But it's stupid to eat more animal protein with less nutrient density. So today in France, we have, I think it's 63% of the protein, animal protein. We can decrease till 50%, without any nutritional problem. So we can decrease. But if we have a higher density value, a higher nutritional density value, at the moment it's just a model, but it's an interesting model. We can decrease to 40% because we'll have more B12 because cows have good rumination, because we have more D3 because cows goes outside with the sun and synthesizes vitamins. They will have more omega-3 because they are in pasture, they eat grass, etc. So we have this idea to say we can decrease we must decrease the animal product consumption because of the environment, but we must decrease, and we can decrease because we can have a higher nutrient density value. So nutrient density value for animal and for vegetal is really the basis for change, the agroecological change we all hope. It's if the consumer understands, he can buy a little more because it's good for his health. And if this premium is given to the farmer to change the practices, we can say that nutritional density for both animal and vegetal is the key for the change, and we need this change in quantity and in quality.
And do you feel like the discussion on this has changed in the last, let's say, year and a half or year and a few months, like since we talked? Like we were, let's say, in autumn of 2020, we talked. Like, has it changed? I mean, we're doing a full series on it, but of course we're not the world media, etc. It feels like there is more discussion, or there is more conversation on quality and not necessarily quantity. But is that just my bubble? Do you feel that as well in the scientific world, in the consumer world? What is your feeling of the temperature, let's say, of the room?
Well, maybe I'm not the good person because I'm so involved that I think all the discussion I have in my world, my small world, I think that the quality, the environmental and the nutritional quality of the food is more and more important. But it's my small world. I don't know.
Has your small world increased? And like, do you see new people entering your small world compared to 5 or 10 years ago?
I think so. When I discussed 20 years ago, 10 years ago, with the people of the on the dairy side, and I said it's very important to decrease the methane, the greenhouse gas emission from the cows. They say, "Oh, Pierre, don't tell that. Nobody knows that cows have a responsibility in the greenhouse gas. Nobody knows what is methane, etc." Now they know, and now they understand that they have to do things to improve things. But even 10 years ago, the big people in the file, in the industry, in the dairy industry, say, no, don't say that. It's not our problem. Now they know it's their problem, so they have to change, and of course they have more interest to change.
Do you see that methane issue, is that connected? I mean, we've seen, I think, some signs of that to also the feed of the cow, the health of the cow, like healthy cows on healthy pasture have less. Is that something I mean, we all want that, of course, but is it something you've also seen?
Well, the first paper we published in the scientific press about methane emission and quality of the feed from the cows was in 2003. So we had a patent on not the way of feeding the cow, but the way of measuring the quantity of methane from the fatty acid analysis in the milk.
But if it has been since then, why 20 years later are we still saying, like, basically all cows are the same and all milk is the same, all animal protein is the same, methane is this, and we see this beautiful but very wrong, let's say, stats of our world in data that I see constantly floating around everywhere? Is that just ignorance or just not wanting to go into the science?
No, I think it's related with the discussion we had before. I'm not very proud because we knew how to do 15 years ago. The recognition by the United Nations framework for climate change of our method was in 2012. What have we done since 2012? Not a lot of things, but during years and years, the people from the dairy industry said, as I said before, they were not concerned. They were not involved in the improvement of the environmental quality. It was typical for a typical example of greenwashing. Yes, we'll do it, but they didn't do it. But now they have to do it. I'm quite optimistic. I think we have the solution. Not only us, but in the scientific side of the problem, there are a lot of solutions, and now we just have to implement it. And I think again, if you only say to a consumer, you have to buy this milk because the cows who produce this milk decrease the methane emission from 20%. I said, okay, he will not buy it. Only 2 or 3
like me, yeah.
But if you say it's better for your health, I will probably buy it. So for me, well, I'm not a young man anymore, but I'm enthusiastic like a young man sometimes because if you can prove, and that's what we've done in this last 20 years, that the end point is the human health. And if you improve environment, if you improve soil health, plant health, animal health, the consequence will be good for me, for you, for the consumer. I think this is really the end point, because you can change the way people buy food and the way people eat. And then you can improve a lot of things. Why we're so concerned about the vegetal side, because of course during these years when you speak of climate, you need plants. You need a lot of plants. You need a lot of
living roots.
yeah. You need life in the soils. You need carbon in the soil, etc. And you have to, if people understand that their health, their life is connected to the life of the soil and the life of the animals, they will probably change. They will not. I don't know if it's difficult to translate, but there was a political guy in France when I was young who said, I asked people to be civic. They didn't change. So I started to be cynic. And that's something like that.
Yeah, no. It's a partly selfish or understanding you're part of a bigger system and your life and health depends on that. And have you seen, I was discussing that this morning on something different, but on the organic sector, which took a bit of a hit, let's say last year, in some countries where inflation and prices, and especially in the supermarkets, like where you can easily compare one organic brand to a non-organic, and people were wondering, and often with extreme energy costs and extreme other costs, like for the first time, many organic brands didn't grow or even lost money and market share. What has been the last few years like for Bleu-Blanc-Coeur? Because there it seems the health connection is a big reason for many to buy. How is, sorry, long question. How has Bleu-Blanc-Coeur been doing for the last, let's say, 2 years in these crazy times?
No, it's still growing. It's even growing very well in some sectors.
Which is fascinating.
In the Bleu-Blanc-Coeur is an association. And when all the people meet together, it's people, some are farmers, some are consumers, some are retailers. And
some are chefs.
My job is to put all the people in the same direction, which is not so easy. And one of my big sentences is to say, what we need to have is a minimal cost for a maximal impact. We can sometimes we didn't have a very strong position on the non-GMO, for instance, because non-GMOs, it's a big cost, and the impact on environment and health is low. I can understand that we have to fight the GMO, but it's just an example. Mm-hmm. But for me, the nutritional composition of the food is more important. So we still have an extra cost of something like 5% for a Bleu-Blanc-Coeur product compared to another product, but it's not so important. So even some retailer, for instance, some big retailer in France, all the milk is Bleu-Blanc-Coeur, all the eggs are Bleu-Blanc-Coeur. After, people can choose if it's Bleu-Blanc-Coeur organic or Bleu-Blanc-Coeur red label or just Bleu-Blanc-Coeur.
But the basis is that.
Yeah, and so the inflation it's a problem, but it's not a big problem like on the organic side, because we manage the overcost.
So do you think it's more that you've been growing because the difference is not so much, or in some cases you're just the full milk shelf is anyway Bleu-Blanc-Coeur, so that doesn't, or has it to do with the interest from the consumer for health has not gone down over the last couple of years? Or if you, I mean, of course you don't know, but what does your feeling say?
Well, I would like to answer it because the consumer wants to buy something which is healthier, but I'm not sure I'm honest if I say that. It's because we had to convince not only consumer, but the people who put the food on the market, which means retailer, brands, etc. And for them, Bleu-Blanc-Coeur, it's a good choice because now it's about 64%, I think, of the French consumer know what is Bleu-Blanc-Coeur. Well, they recognize the logo. They don't know what it is, but they have a positive view. Even last year in France, I have suddenly my view is mainly French, but in France, all the label, organic red label, decrease in terms of trust from the consumer, but not Bleu-Blanc-Coeur. Bleu-Blanc-Coeur grew in trust. So it's probably not enough, but we started from zero.
64 in 20 years is a lot. Yeah.
And even if the people don't know exactly what it is, they have a positive. We have now 30,000 people in the Bleu-Blanc-Coeur Association. Some of them are health professionals, some of them are farmers, some of them are just consumers. A lot of them, let's say some of them, but important in France, are chefs from big restaurants. The Thierry Marx, which is the very famous chef in France, is now the official guy who talk for porte-parole of Bleu-Blanc-Coeur.
Spokesperson.
So it's important if you go to a restaurant or if you go to your physician and say, oh, Bleu-Blanc-Coeur is good for you. Well, that's important. And of course, you need to convince them with data for the chef and data for the physician, but it's not the same data, but we have the data.
Speaking of which, what has been exciting on the data side over the last 2 years, let's say, what has been interesting, or two plus years in terms of studies, because you're continuously, of course, doing a lot of different studies. We talked about inflammation, I think last time, of course, in terms of COVID, but also on the breastfeeding side, there were some very interesting studies. What has been exciting that's you're working or that has come out, or that you are excited to share in terms of the science?
Well, maybe I'm sorry because I don't have the results of the trial, but the trial with the pregnant mother is finished now.
The trial
with the pregnant mothers that practice breastfeeding. So I spoke of these trials 2 years ago, and now that the trial is finished, and we'll have the results in the next weeks or months. But the experimental scheme is very interesting because we had 2 groups of mothers that were recruited at a 6 months visit at the hospital, and they received from 6 months to the birth, they receive a Bleu-Blanc-Coeur product or conventional product, the same meal, same quantity of egg, milk, bread, etc. Only the way of production, the food was different. It's very small, like in all our trials, the experimental variable was very little. You have the same meal, only the way of producing the food is different. And we measured 3 things. First is the quality, the composition of the milk, of the breast milk, of course, at 21 days and 40 days. So I hope we'll see something. And the second thing is the microbiota of the baby. So we took the feces of the
human
baby.
treasure, as we call it. Yeah,
the human treasure. Yeah, and we'll check. I don't know what we'll see, but what we will check, we'll check. Is there something on the microbiota of the baby, which means the future of the baby, related not only to the way her mother ate during the pregnancy, but the way the cow, the chicken, etc., ate before the pregnancy. And the second footprint will be what we call the epigenetic footprint. Now the science of some interesting things about what they call it predictive medicine. It's RNA. It's non-invasive. We'll check in the 2 different group of mother in the composition of the milk. If we find these non-invasive markers, of what can happen in the future, called predictive medicine. It's quite complicated. I don't know if we'll see something, if we'll have results, but anyway, to check with such a small difference on the way food is produced, to look for differences in the footprints, for epigenetic footprint, microbiota footprint, and a biochemical footprint. It's quite interesting, and I'm quite proud to to participate to this kind of trial. So you have to interview me another time when I have the
With
results.
great pleasure. It's fascinating because I think you've done already some breastfeeding work before, right? Where you've seen effect, but not this explicit or this deep, and definitely not with double blind.
It's always the same with science. You do a trial because you want to have a result. Once you have a result, you have half an answer and
you need another trial.
10 new questions. So we did it at a small scale. We did it with mothers that have eaten Bleu-Blanc-Coeur, only an experimental group, and we compared to the average value of the breast milk in France, and we had huge differences. So now we did this trial with
double click. You need to go deeper.
Yeah.
Fascinating. And are there any plans for? I mean, of course you're gonna do, but with the veggie side as well, or are you immediately stepping to okay, let's do a full meal?
No, on the veggie side, what I would like to do is to do a trial to see, because I spoke of antioxidant value of the pulses, and but we don't know if this so it give a good view of the health of the tomato, for instance, and that are all these antioxidants available for men. We don't know. I remember the first human trial I did in 2000. I was presenting results of trials we did before on milk and eggs, and at a congress, and then a physician came and said, Pierre, you didn't prove anything. Maybe you have more omega-3 in eggs, but what happened when men eat the egg? Well, maybe the omega-3 will be oxidized, maybe they will disappear, maybe they will use that energy. You have to do a human trial. Wow, human trial. But he was true. So we have to do it on the vegetal side also. If not, we'll prove a better health for the tomato, but not for men who eat tomatoes. So this will be the future.
And are you expecting differences also, because people are talking about your own microbiome? Of course, you're looking at the one of the babies, that your ability to absorb, because I can eat a carrot that has 20 times the beta-carotene, but if I'm not able to absorb that, is that something you're worried about, interested in, excited, or a combination of all?
That's the reason I want to do at the end of my career. I want to do a clinical trial with the whole meal, because the relationship between the animal and vegetal side, the relationship between inflammatory process and antioxidant process are huge, and it's difficult. Science is so
reductionist.
Yes, you have very good specialist of oxidation of the tomato, and very good specialist of the inflammatory in the milk. But put everything together, that's life, that's health. And to make a relation with the health of the soil and of the animals and the plants, that's the real life. And if we can check what are the results of changing everything from the soil, that's a noble goal, no?
Absolutely.
For young men.
And hopefully we'll be checking in a few times. Until then, I want to be conscious of your time as well. And thank you so much for this update. Any final things you would like to share, or should we be checking in soonish when the first results are coming in? And of course, when you're ready for a whole meal comparison, because that's going to be quite a research.
Yeah, no, it's a good conclusion. Thank you, Koen.
Thank you so much again for your time, and good luck with all the work.
Yeah, thank you very much. Good luck for you too, and thank you. Bye.
Thank you so much for listening all the way to the end. For the show notes and links we discussed in this episode, check out our website, investinginregenerativeagriculture.com/posts. If you like this episode, why not share it with a friend or give us a rating on Apple Podcasts? That really helps. Thanks again, and see you next time.